My name is Monk Rowe, and I'm very pleased to have a follow-up session with Charles Tolliver. Welcome, sir. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
You said something at the end of our first interview that has been on my mind, so I wanted to follow up, and it had to do with, I believe the date was August 5th, 1964, your first recording experience with Jackie McLean. And you described a rehearsal process, and Alfred Lyon had his stopwatch. I wonder if you can
Yes.
tell me what time was he keeping?
Well, it was timing the each song as we went through it in the rehearsal, and based on his experience, he would generally, along with whoever's the leader, determine how many choruses you would make based on the timing of the head of the song. So if a song was a minute, uh, probably you would get a couple of choruses. The leader could play as long as he liked.
So maybe I'm thinking that you're thinking in your head, I'm going to be the leader someday, and I'm going to get to play as long as I.
No, no,
No.
not at all. It just was just happy to be included, and to do my best.
So on that day, you described a rehearsal, and then getting into a taxi and going to Van Gelder Studios. So am I correct that that whole record was rehearsed and recorded in one day?
No, there
Okay.
was um, one day, maybe two, depending on the complexity of the songs,
Hmm.
and then the next day, uh, everybody would file into a couple of checkered cabs. I guess if you had a checkered cab now, it would be worth something on the antique car markets.
Right. A
You
lot of
know,
that's
with
being
with the little
being
jumper seats uh, facing the regular seats. So you could get luggage in there. You could get three passengers, three, four, maybe five passengers. Two facing the
yeah,
other three, and
and a
all,
saxophone and a trumpet and a
yeah, all of that in the trunk, and off we'd go. And that was the procedure for any Blue Note recording, other than you know musicians who had their own cars. They would, drive to uh, Rudy's studio.
Did you wear headphones at that point?
No,
Okay.
no.
Everybody could
There
hear you.
wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't the practice of wearing earphones. I mean, I suppose they they were in use, but I don't recall uh, any use of headphones.
Hmm.
We were all in a sort of semi horseshoe uh, setup, piano the farthest away, and then bass and drums right together. No partitions or anything, and the horns facing the piano. So it was like that sort of like a little J type of thing.
Hmm.
And but the secret of Rudy Van Gelder was his microphones.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, he was using uh, French chirps and special coverings for them,
Hmm.
and a direct to master 2 track,
2 track, yeah.
but it was how he equalized everything coming in, you know.
I see. Well, I'm struck by the fact that you mentioned showing up for this rehearsal, and oh my God, there's Roy Haynes and Herbie Hancock, who actually was only fairly close to age to you, and I just find it so
Well, he
interesting that
was he was 24,
huh
23, 24, and me 21 or 22, you
yeah,
know. Yeah.
very exciting. So I was listening to something from a record you did years later in '72. Happened to have one of my favorite drummers, Alvin Queen, on it, and the record was Impact. And I'm curious if the rehearsal time and recording time, how it compared to your first experience with Jackie McLean. Did you have more time, less time?
Well, that was a live recording.
I see.
That was, I mean, you know, it was, we were, I was heavily touring that band, you know, during that period, especially in Europe. And we were at this famous club at the time called the Domicile in Munich. And that's where we recorded that. You know?
And Alvin is in Switzerland now.
Yes, he's living in Switzerland. Yeah.
Yes. Um, I had a question that had to do with spirituality. And I think I'm guilty of, for too long, when people bring up spirituality, I think of religion or faith. And I wanted to read something that Cecil McBee said in a conversation I had with him last November. And it was about spirituality and different periods in jazz. And he said, well, if it ain't spiritual, don't play it. You know, your spirit is what makes you play the instrument. If you're not spiritual, you ain't feeling nothing. Elvin Jones used to say, if you ain't playing nothing, get him off the stage and let someone else get up there and play it. So I don't really have a question, Charles, but does spirituality play a role in your composing and in your playing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I basically want to have a spiritual connection to the musicians that I'm performing with at the time, and so I have their um, capabilities in mind. Uh, Sometimes when I'm writing something, I said, well, so and so would probably like to solo off this or play this, you know. So there is that spiritual connection to your fellow musicians, you know, a lot when you're writing songs, you know, if you are looking for some sort of inspiration. Um, and my inspiration generally is rhythmical, dealing with the drums, you know, because I write a lot off of inspirational drum things.
Is there something that could happen in your day to day life that might inspire you to run to your staff paper or your computer or your keyboard or whatever and
Yeah,
start working
I
on it?
mean that happens every day. A drum lick.
Okay,
I mean seriously, you know, it's not necessarily going to the piano and you know saying, "Oh, what's this little song that's going over around in my head?" Uh, it generally is coming off some sort of rhythmical thing that I hear between the drums and the bass. and then I'll put a melody to it, and then chord changes if it needs some chord changes.
I see. It's always the hardest part for me is the chord changes. Finding something that's interesting, but you had said I really got a kick out of your story about learning about the minor nine chord in college because I had the same experience except it was with the major seven. And for a while it was all about major sevenths. It was and eventually it got a little bit too happy for me, so I had to.
Well, sometimes it's a lot more difficult to get some sort of solo activity out of major rather than minor. And
Mhm.
as you probably know, I mean, John Coltrane he experimented with uh, not playing in the minor, towards the end of his life. You know, he did a lot of things off of a major feeling as opposed to a minor feeling. You know.
I've been reading a little bit about Sun Ra and that I guess very experimental music that he did and others at that time. I wonder if you'd had any experience hearing him or groups like the Art Ensemble of Chicago that were, I mean, they were out there, I guess is the best way I can put it. And I'm wondering if you had ever heard them live.
No, except for of course, Sun Ra because that was coming up at the same time as that he was really at the forefront with what he was doing. Um, but I didn't get a chance to, you know, for any of us guys to rub shoulders together, so to speak, during that period. But I mean, they carved out a niche, you know, in this, and a lot of it had to do with musical theater, you know, which struck a lot of fans as very interesting and palatable, and so rather than coming to a performance, uh, in bow tie, you know, they would come to hear these fellows who stripped away all of those formalities,
Hmm.
both musically and um, visually, you know, and it worked for them, I mean, till now you have legions of followers of Sun Ra's output,
Which was considerable.
Yeah, and Marshall, he's still alive and occasionally brings a band,
Yes.
much younger players who weren't even born when they first started, now, yeah.
They seem to have had the experience of going to Europe at certain parts during that length of time they were together and
Well, the
be,
Europeans love the musical theater, and so definitely. I mean, till now, they have revivals, maybe not every year, but and then the younger music folk, get a chance to find out what that's all about and see if they like it,
hmm.
So it continues on that way.
Did you find reception to your groups different in England and the continent than in the United States?
No, it just was um, depending on what year it was or a particular time. It was just more accessible. There were a lot more uh, music fans into you know the music that was being produced at that time. So you would you would have a rather large gathering, whenever you played somewhere, as opposed to here. You know, that was the difference. They were, they had done their homework, these fans, and so they were there, you know, uh, to really soak in this American art form, and so I didn't see a difference in. I mean, you were playing to fans that knew that you were coming, and so they showed up. And it would be the same in the states, just less.
I see.
That's all.
Yeah.
Same fervor, same fans, just less. You know, because it's a special occasion when you were overseas, so there would be really nice concerts set up a lot through government radio and television and things like that. And there were, of course, the underground club scene or whatever, and a few clubs on the level of the New York style clubs, and other jazz venues across the United States. When I was coming up, uh, one of the ways that the livelihood of our most known uh, jazz heroes uh, was done through touring the black theater uh, in the major cities. You know,
Was that the
whatever was that theater that that had live shows, um, like the Apollo.
hmm
So you had a number of Apollo-like theaters, in the major cities across the United States, and a band would come into the town and play that theater in between the movies. The movies would be shown, you know, Hopalong Cassidy, you name it. And then the band will come on and play. Now, of course, um, who knows who are out there in the audience listening, but that the tours were made that way. You would play the Howard theaters like in Washington D.C. and the Apollo and other theaters like that, in the black districts across the United States, and of course whatever was the main nightclub, in that town.
a number of people I've talked to as as in their formative years mention how effective it was when the band would rise up from the pit, especially if it was a big band, and they never forgot that sound and that sight of those musicians just
Yeah,
appearing like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, of course, the two major venues in New York City, that fostered it was the Cotton Club and the Savoy. I didn't get a chance to see the Cotton Club, although it was still there when my family
hmm
got here to New York, but it wasn't functioning like it was in the heyday, you know, of the earlier part of last century. And the Savoy was still there. In fact, I wanted to know where that was, so I kind of meandered over to where it was one day, and standing out front was Idris Suleiman. That I was to find out later
Yes.
that was who I met.
Hmm.
And I asked him, is this a boy? And he was very nice to me. Saw that I was this young little kid, 10 years old. And lo and behold, I would get a chance to meet him and know him. Uh, years after I broke in, um, coming through Copenhagen, which is where he immigrated to.
Let's see.
Both he and Shahib Shahab were, and towards the end of his life as well, Ben Webster, they were all residents of Copenhagen. You know, uh,
Do you
I
think they?
think I think that Idris and Shahib Shahab, they finally came back home before they passed away. But Ben Webster, he passed away in Copenhagen.
Yeah. Do you think they found what they were looking for over over there?
Oh, absolutely. They had a chance to play more in the you know well-known Montmartre in the case of Copenhagen, and just appreciated, they were loved by the localities where they lived, treated as, you know, high artists,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Sidney Bechet was sort of the king of that. I think going to France and
Yeah,
very popular.
yeah. Well, it was another time. The whole world was different then,
Well, you lead me into something that I was debating about asking, and it's not a musical question, but speaking of the whole world or maybe our country, how are you feeling about the state of our country today, current events?
Well, if I were to put out my mind on that, if I weren't a musician, I'd be, a warrior in that. Um, but I mean, uh, it's just going to take a lot more percentage of good people, good humans, to outlast the bad ones, and we seem to be, we seem to have a little bit more percentage of good people. If we didn't, I mean, the United States right now might not be livable for a lot of folks, but we do have some stopgaps, I mean, right now you really they have to really knuckle down with the you know people that we've elected to control the government, and as long as they do that, um, we could outlast the situation that is going on right now. You know? Because luckily, in this country, the type of insurrection that happened on 1/6 uh, absolutely is an aberration because of the way our system is set up. That sort of thing could never succeed. But it did put the rest of the world on notice that, you know, there are some knuckleheads here that would try that, like what they go through every few years elsewhere, accepting that the type of representative government we have and that percentage of 60/40, sometimes 70/30, but 60/40, you know, um, enables us to overcome, these periods when the this sort of representative government is tested just by crazy folks who they know that they are, but they can't help themselves. They're doubling down on it because uh, it's how they were brought up. They didn't just learn to be this way, it's how they were brought up, and so uh, we'll have to see. I mean, every decades or so, this country is going to go through that, and just have to make sure that those pillars that have been set up to handle this are actually, steadfastly used to repel, as what happened, you know, with this latest one. And luckily, we have the right folks in government right now.
Hmm.
Because if it had been the other way around, um, truly, the country would be facing a serious confrontation, deadly confrontation, I would
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing your opinions about that. Um, I was very happy to learn from you on the phone about the upcoming celebration of Strata-East Records, and could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, things got up and running in 1971. Brought about by my dearly departed Stanley Cowell and myself, and it was probably at the right moment that something like that could be done, because there was a vacuum that had been created for bringing on new guys into recording, and getting them out there like it was, with the Blue Notes and Prestiges and all the other uh, smaller independent labels who were issuing product. And it sort of was a labor of love, so to speak. And just little by little, it started to catch on with some musicians, and we started issuing product, and mom then popped it along.
Good phrase.
Basically, mom then popped it along till now. Yeah, it wasn't going for the big uh, home run. Just getting the product out there where the fans would get a hold of it. It was a lot easier in the first 10 years because you had record stores, and as long as you kept the records in the bins somehow, you know, most of the fans of music, they pick up on it.
Do you still have original copies of the 60 plus records that Strata East
I
issued?
wish I wish I had. I mean, but there are people who do have them,
Yes.
and they go for very hefty, uh, you know,
Yes. Their value has
and
gone
yeah,
up.
in order if you want to get one.
I
I
think
mean,
we
I have a number of them, but I don't think I have all of the ones that came through.
mm,
You know, the first, because most of them came through in the first 10 years. You know, so yeah.
I think you and I ought to start a oh, I don't know, a GoFundMe or something, and so we can get you all your original Strata East records back.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, you'd get some hefty funding there, maybe.
Yes. We'll have to write a grant. You spoke a little bit about Andrew Hill and how you credit him with his approach to instruction about how to play his music.
No, not instruction, just observing how he allowed the people that he had gathered for whatever, a recording or performances,
Hmm.
to interpret uh, the music without being dogmatic as to how he wanted it done.
I see.
Yeah. But he always chose rhythm section guys that really helped to set it up because they knew, how he probably wanted things to go.
Hmm.
And of course, I think he probably always worked things out with his rhythm section, before he would bring in horns. And then so, when you showed up, you know, the way to interpret it was already there, and so that approach stayed with me, and I was grateful to have had an opportunity to basically, from time to time, perform with Andrew at the beginning of my career.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, right off the bat, 1964, actually. You know, so yeah,
Is it possible for you to describe the thought process that is occurring when you're improvising?
I have a staff, continuous staff running in front of me virtually in my consciousness, and I'm sort of putting notes on there as the staff is running along and catching those notes on the instrument. Of course, this is all simultaneous, instantaneously going on. It's a lot easier to do it if you've got a slower tempo. When there's a breakneck speed, then the brain is really firing off. In my case, that's basically it. I have a virtual
That's fascinating. I never heard anybody describe
staff.
it quite that way. Yeah.
That staff is empty until the song starts. Well, the song is basically memorized to play it,
Yeah.
and then up comes the staff.
Is there such a
But
thing?
but sometimes it, I don't use my mind to bring the staff up, and sometimes it just shows up, you know, and usually that's when I get exploratory, you know, and I start rumbling with the notes,
Good phrase. If you had a student, you said that to a student, and they said, "Well, why should I pretend? I'm just going to say it." What do you mean by exploratory?
Not playing what you've practiced that you know is absolutely perfect for the chord changes.
And is there anything that constitutes a mistake or a wrong note for you?
only if you can't correct it. So that comes with years of experience.
Well, I've had that discussion about wrong notes with a number of people, and they agree with you about you're going to play them. You just have to deal with it.
Well, there are no wrong notes. What I mean by that is not, I mean, intentionally. Saxophones, because of the pads, and they have to use all of their fingers. You know, uh, they have a lot more possibilities for covering what they might consider a mistake.
Hmm.
But for brass, for trumpet, you have no such support. You have these three valves. You only have three funnels to work with them. Everything you do has to be controlled by your diaphragm and your embouchure. And uh, your embouchure will, I mean, sometimes the setup is just, it won't respond right. And it also depends on your dental setup.
Mm. Hmm.
And, you know,
Yeah.
you have to know how, for trumpet, when there's the danger that it's not that you know what you want to do and where you want to go with something. It's how well the embouchure is set up to deliver it.
Do you have a regimen that you do to try to stay stay healthy and as capable of playing what's in your head and physically making it happen?
Yes, to not abuse myself in any form, so that my physical self will be able to deliver. Then it's about how well I utilize that, you know, uh, with the instrument.
Yeah.
And, um,
You had
I don't have a routine.
you had
Uh,
mentioned over the years if you had a person in your band, I think the way you put it was they were engaging in something they needed to do what they were doing somewhere else. And it seems certain eras of jazz that
did I say that?
you said that. It was a nice way to put it. If you're going to do that, do it with someone else.
Well, I might have been referring to how I have observed, um, those few instances when um, a musician may have, by the way, not by what they say, but by the way they perform when they're playing with you,
Hmm.
that their minds and persona is not um, as a team player,
I see.
you know, and in that case, it would be better for them to uh, do their own thing or go,
Hmm.
do somewhere else. But generally, it really depends on the flavor and what is the aspirations of anyone who calls you for a gig, or what you want to have happen, on the bandstand for your own gig. And that's by sorting it out with, different musicians, seeing how well they, you know, work and perform with you.
Hmm.
And the good thing is that there are good choices. You don't have to be locked down with just one set of guys, and that's always been the case, mostly, excepting in the case when some iconic situations develop with a certain group of men, which is how this art form basically propels itself. We had about four or five major groups that was comprised of the same individuals for a number of years, and they helped to propel the art form forward by what they did together. You know, and I think it's a great example of uh, you know the word repertorial. You know, of uh, one group of players playing a set repertoire over or a style of repertoire over a number of years. That's really repertory.
Are you speaking of people like Charles Mingus and Ellington?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But also Max Roach and Clifford Brown. That they created a repertory that'll live forever. A repertory of using a great American songbook as well as their own compositions, and putting arrangements to them, uh, that will last forever.
Yeah.
I mean, the show, Broadway writers had no idea that those beautiful songs that they wrote that became a part of the American songbook could be completely uh, made even better, you know, with chord substitutions and rhythmical arrangements and rhythmical displacement. And, uh, you know, the American songbook, if you were not a composer, you don't need it because there's just so much to work with there, that you can, make arrangements out of. But I mean, Mingus, uh, uh, I mean, with the small group, Mingus and well, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. That model is still king as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
If you're getting in this, yes, we have all this that's going on now. These different types of musical theatrical events. But if you're not dealing with that model in some fashion, okay, it might be great music, but it's not in this particular part of the art form. So, uh, yeah, Max Roach and Clifford Brown. That's a book all by repertory book all by itself. At least two or three Miles Davis's repertory bands. Horace Silver, you could spend your entire lifetime using that repertory or that style. Art Blakey, the same thing. The great thing about Art Blakey, as opposed to Horace Silver, who was a pianist, so he wrote all his material, which is now our our American songbook,
Hmm.
basically jazz music songbook. But Art Blakey, he drew or put in his band, you know, on each instrument, just incredible musicians who were great composers. So that's a whole repertory by itself, at indispensable. Like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie is indispensable. That model, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, especially the ones from the beginning through 1965. That's totally indispensable if you're going to be in this, and have the validity. You have to know that material, you know, and so, um, yeah.
Well said. I'm gonna.
Well, let's not forget Thelonious Monk. I
Right,
mean,
right.
that's a whole nother category by itself because not only was he the underpinnings harmonically for modern jazz, but he was musical theater at the same time.
Indeed.
I mean, you couldn't make him up. You can't make that up. Because uh, I got a chance to actually be close enough to see, actually to talk to him, you know. But talking to him was like um, talking to a psychiatrist who didn't answer you back. you know, yeah, yes. I mean, so the Thelonious Monk repertoire is like hard silver. I mean, it's like it's indispensable. It's a requirement. If you haven't dealt with that, then you're missing on
Yeah.
some validity. You know. Um, Now, nobody may not tell any young fellow or anything like that. They have to already. This they have to already have mother wit. You know what mother wit is? Mother wit. Yeah, you have to already have it. To do that on your own. You know,
Yeah.
and so that you don't have to copy it. You have to know it, though. You have to know it.
All right. Words of wisdom. I'm gonna wrap up here with a question that I've been debating about asking, and it. I have two variations on it, so I'm going to try it out on you, Charles. What does music mean, or what can music mean?
Well, I think that music is. We were talking about spiritual uh, at the beginning. Um, Music, in whatever form it is to people around the world, whether they know it or not, but most of them do know that they have to have it at some point during the day, you know, in order to get through, um, with life as a human being on this planet. And as I said in the previous session we did, Art Blakey said it best. You know what he said, right?
I'd like to hear it again.
Oh yeah, I mean, he come out off of a blistering song, and say to the audience, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and that featured so and so and so, and we're here to wash away the dust of your everyday life, and so that's it.
I I'll wrap up. This is like a tag on a good jazz tune. I think I picked out some things that you said in our first session that I thought were marvelous and put them into a paragraph for you. So this is Charles Tolliver. Once I realized I could do something with this art form, I just wanted to belong. It's a glorious adventure, my life's work. I have not a nanosecond of regret. I am my grandmother and mother. You finish what you start.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for starting and keeping going.
Thank you. You know, we just got to keep our health. I mean, we managed to get past this mother of all pandemics in our lifetime.
Hmm.
So hopefully we're going to be okay and get some music up to the Utica area of the country.
That would be really nice.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do about that.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much, and I hope your Strata East event is fulfilling and goes very well.
Well, share it with your constituents.
I
You
definitely
know,
will.
as Charlie Parker said, my worthy constituents
Hmm.
from Massey Hall. You know, and hopefully they'll try to get themselves into the virtual audience.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Tolliver, thank you again for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.